The bell above the door of Gleaming Gems jingled merrily, a sound that usually signaled a happy customer ready to admire the sparkling treasures within. Today, however, the sound was a cruel joke. Inside, Mrs. Higgins, the store owner, lay on the floor, her hands tied behind her back with duct tape. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted around the ransacked shop. The display cases, usually filled with glittering necklaces and rings, were now mostly empty. Shards of glass glittered like fallen stars on the velvet lining. The air hung thick with the scent of fear and shattered dreams. Mrs. Higgins, a kind woman with a gentle smile and a love for all things sparkly, had owned Gleaming Gems for over 20 years. It was her pride and joy, a place where she helped people find the perfect piece of jewelry to celebrate life's special moments. Now, it was a scene of chaos and violation. The most valuable item, the Serafina necklace, was gone. It was a delicate piece, crafted from white gold and adorned with shimmering opals that caught the light like captured rainbows. It was Mrs. Higgins' signature piece, the one she always showcased in the front window. Its value was estimated at over $50,000. Also missing was the Dragon's Breath ring, a thick band of intricately carved silver, featuring a fiery ruby that seemed to glow with an inner light. It was a recent addition to the store, and had already become a favorite among customers. The robber had been quick and efficient. He had burst into the store just as Mrs. Higgins was opening for the day, brandishing a small, silver pistol. He'd forced her to the ground, tied her up, and then systematically emptied the display cases, stuffing the jewels into a large duffel bag. He was in and out in less than 10 minutes, leaving Mrs. Higgins terrified and her store in ruins. As soon as she could wriggle free, Mrs. Higgins frantically called 911. The police arrived quickly, sirens wailing and lights flashing, shattering the morning calm of the quiet street. Officers swarmed the store, taking statements, dusting for fingerprints, and trying to piece together what had happened. Detective Reyes, a seasoned investigator with a sharp mind and an even sharper eye, arrived on the scene. He surveyed the damage, his face grim. He spoke calmly to Mrs. Higgins, reassuring her that they would do everything they could to catch the perpetrator and recover her stolen treasures. He promised her justice, but he knew that catching a thief who seemed to vanish into thin air would be a difficult task. The detective had a feeling that this case would be more complicated than it initially seemed. The robber had been too quick, too efficient. It was almost as if he knew exactly what he was looking for, and exactly where to find it. This wasn't just a random act of violence, it was a carefully planned operation. Detective Reyes made a mental note to check local pawn shops and jewelry stores. He also requested security footage from nearby businesses. The search for the Gleaming Gems robber had begun. Detective Reyes spent the next few hours meticulously examining the security footage from nearby businesses. The images were grainy and often obscured by passing cars or pedestrians, but he was determined to find a clue, anything that might lead him to the robber. Finally, after hours of painstaking review, he spotted something. A figure, clad in dark clothing and wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, could be seen hurrying away from the direction of Gleaming Gems just minutes after the estimated time of the robbery. The figure was carrying a large, dark-colored duffel bag. The detective zoomed in on the image, but the figure's face remained hidden. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The detective showed the still image to Mrs. Higgins. She peered at it through her thick glasses, her brow furrowed in concentration. I can't be sure," she said hesitantly. "He's wearing a hat, and it all happened so fast. But the build. It looks a little like a man who was in the store a few days ago." He asked about the Serafina necklace. "Did he give you a name?" Detective Reyes asked, his voice filled with anticipation. Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "No, he didn't. He just seemed very interested in the necklace. He asked a lot of questions about its value and the opals." Detective Reyes felt a surge of adrenaline. He had a lead. He immediately pulled up the store's customer records, searching for anyone who had recently inquired about the Serafina necklace. After a few minutes, he found a name, Mark Peterson. The record showed a phone number and a home address. Reyes ran the name through the police database. Mark Peterson had a minor record, a couple of traffic violations and a past charge for petty theft, but nothing major. However, his address was only a few blocks away from Gleaming Gems. It was definitely worth investigating. Detective Reyes and his partner, Officer Davies, drove to Mark Peterson's address. It was a small, slightly run-down apartment building. They parked their car a block away and approached the building on foot. As they neared the entrance, they spotted a man matching Mark Peterson's description exiting the building. He was carrying a small suitcase. He looked nervous, glancing around as if he were expecting someone. "That's him," Officer Davies whispered. Detective Reyes nodded. "Let's go." They approached Mark Peterson and identified themselves as police officers. Mark Peterson's eyes widened in surprise. He stammered, "Oh, officers. Is there a problem?" "We'd like to ask you a few questions, Mr. Peterson," Detective Reyes said calmly. "It's about the robbery at Gleaming Gems this morning." Mark Peterson's face paled. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Gleaming Gems? I don't know anything about that," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been out of town." "Oh, really?" Detective Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Where were you?" I was in Canada," Mark Peterson said quickly. "On a business trip." Detective Reyes exchanged a look with Officer Davies. "Canada, huh? That's quite a coincidence. We were just talking to Mrs. Higgins, and she mentioned someone asking about the Serafina necklace a few days ago." Mark Peterson's eyes darted around nervously. He swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never been to Gleaming Gems in my life." Detective Reyes smiled thinly. "Well, Mr. Peterson, we're going to need you to come down to the station with us. We have a few more questions for you." At the police station, Mark Peterson sat in a small, sterile interrogation room. The walls were painted a drab beige, and the only furniture was a metal table and two uncomfortable-looking chairs. The room was designed to be unsettling, to make suspects feel vulnerable and exposed. Detective Reyes sat across from Mark, his gaze steady and unwavering. Officer Davies stood silently by the door, observing. "So, Mr. Peterson," Detective Reyes began, his voice calm and measured, "you claim you were in Canada this morning. Can you be more specific? Where in Canada were you, and what were you doing?" Mark Peterson shifted nervously in his chair. "I was in Toronto," he said, his voice slightly more confident than before. "I was there for a business conference. It was about marketing strategies." "Marketing strategies," Detective Reyes repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. "That sounds interesting. Can you tell me the name of the hotel where you were staying?" The Grand Majestic," Mark Peterson stammered. "Yes, the Grand Majestic Hotel. It's a very nice place. And who did you meet with at this conference?" Detective Reyes pressed. Mark Peterson hesitated for a moment. "I met with Mr. Henderson. He's the CEO of a marketing firm." "Mr. Henderson," Detective Reyes said slowly, as if savoring the name. "Do you have Mr. Henderson's contact information?" Mark Peterson fidgeted with his hands. I don't have his card on me. But I can get it for you later." Detective Reyes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Peterson, are you sure you're telling us the truth? Because lying to a police officer is a serious offense." Mark Peterson's face was now slick with sweat. He avoided Detective Reyes's gaze. "I'm telling you the truth. I was in Canada. I have receipts, I have plane tickets. I can prove it." "We'll need to see those receipts and plane tickets, Mr. Peterson," Detective Reyes said, his voice firm. "But in the meantime, we're going to need to verify your story. We'll be contacting the Grand Majestic Hotel and Mr. Henderson to confirm your alibi. Mark Peterson's shoulders slumped. He knew he was in trouble. He had hoped that his hastily concocted story would be enough to fool the police, but he was quickly realizing that Detective Reyes wasn't buying it. "Look," Mark Peterson said, his voice barely a whisper, "can I get a lawyer?" "I think I need a lawyer." Detective Reyes nodded. "That's your right, Mr. Peterson. You have the right to remain silent, and you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you." Officer Davies handed Mark Peterson a form outlining his Miranda rights. Mark Peterson read the form slowly, his hands trembling. He signed the form and then sat back in his chair, defeated. Detective Reyes knew that Mark Peterson's alibi was falling apart. He just needed to find the evidence to prove it. He had a feeling that the truth was close, just waiting to be uncovered. And he was determined to find it. The detective knew that a crumpled receipt was just what they needed. While Mark Peterson sat silently with his lawyer, Detective Reyes and Officer Davies were busy trying to poke holes in his alibi. Officer Davies placed a call to the Grand Majestic Hotel in Toronto. After a lengthy wait on hold, she finally spoke to a hotel clerk. "Hello, I'm Officer Davies with the local police department. We're trying to verify a guest who claims to have stayed at your hotel last night. The name is Mark Peterson." The clerk typed the name into the computer. "One moment, please." After another agonizing pause, the clerk returned. "I'm sorry, officer, but we have no record of a Mark Peterson staying at our hotel last night, or any recent night for that matter." Officer Davies's heart leaped. "Are you absolutely sure? Could you double-check?" The clerk patiently rechecked the system. "Yes, ma'am. I'm positive. No Mark Peterson." Officer Davies hung up the phone, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "He's lying," she announced to Detective Reyes. "There's no record of him at the Grand Majestic." Detective Reyes nodded, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "All right, let's try Mr. Henderson." He spent the next hour tracking down a Mr. Henderson who was indeed the CEO of a marketing firm in Toronto. After explaining the situation, Detective Reyes asked Mr. Henderson if he had met with Mark Peterson. Mr. Henderson chuckled. "Mark Peterson? No, I've never met anyone by that name. And I certainly didn't have a meeting about marketing strategies yesterday. I was actually out of town myself, visiting my daughter. That was it." Mark Peterson's alibi was completely shattered. He wasn't in Canada. He was somewhere else. Somewhere closer to Gleaming Gems. Detective Reyes knew he had to keep digging. He instructed the officers to thoroughly search Mark Peterson's apartment and his car. He had a feeling that they would find something, some piece of evidence that would tie Mark Peterson to the robbery. The stolen jewelry, maybe, or the gun used to threaten Mrs. Higgins. Or perhaps something even more unexpected. The search of the apartment turned up nothing of significance. It was clean and sparsely furnished, almost too ordinary. But when the officers began searching Mark Peterson's car, a beat-up sedan, they hit the jackpot. Hidden under the driver's seat, they found a small, silver pistol. It matched the description of the gun used in the robbery. And in the glove compartment, buried beneath a pile of old maps and fast food wrappers, they found something else. A crumpled, slightly greasy gas station receipt. The kind people often forget about, or toss away without a second thought. This one, however, was about to become a very important piece of evidence. "Reyes, you need to see this," Officer Miller said over the radio, his voice urgent. "We found something in the car." Detective Reyes immediately headed down to the parking garage, his anticipation building with each step. He knew, somehow, that this was the break they needed. This crumpled piece of paper held the key to unlocking the truth. Detective Reyes reached the parking garage and walked briskly towards Mark Peterson's car. Officer Miller stood beside it, holding the gas station receipt carefully in a plastic evidence bag. What have we got? Detective Reyes asked, his eyes fixed on the crumpled paper. Officer Miller handed him the bag. It's a receipt from a Speedy gas station. The one on Elm Street, just a few blocks from Gleaming Gems. Detective Reyes examined the receipt closely. The print was faded, but he could make out the essential details. The date and time were clearly visible, today's date, and 9:30 a.m. The robbery at Gleaming Gems had occurred at approximately 10 a.m. And? Detective Reyes prompted, his voice tight with anticipation. That's not all, Officer Miller said, his voice filled with excitement. The receipt also shows that the purchase was made with a credit card. And guess what name is on the credit card? Detective Reyes already knew the answer. Mark Peterson. Bingo, Officer Miller confirmed. We also got the security footage from the gas station. We're still reviewing it, but it should confirm that Mark Peterson was the one who made the purchase. Detective Reyes felt a surge of triumph. The receipt was the final piece of the puzzle. It placed Mark Peterson just a few blocks from the scene of the crime, just 30 minutes before the robbery. His alibi was not only false, but demonstrably so. He took a deep breath and turned to Officer Miller. Get the security footage processed immediately. I want a clear image of Mark Peterson making that purchase. And then bring him back in. It's time for another chat. Back in the interrogation room, Mark Peterson sat anxiously with his lawyer. He knew that the police were searching his apartment and his car, but he had no idea what they might find. He had been careful, he thought. He had cleaned up the crime scene, disposed of the stolen jewelry, or so he thought, and concocted a believable alibi. But now, he was starting to panic. The door to the interrogation room swung open, and Detective Reyes strode in, followed by Officer Miller. He placed the plastic evidence bag containing the gas station receipt on the table in front of Mark Peterson. Mark Peterson's eyes widened as he recognized the familiar logo of Speedy Gas. His face paled even further. Mr. Peterson, Detective Reyes said, his voice cold and hard, care to explain this? Mark Peterson stared at the receipt, his mind racing. He knew that he was caught. He had no way out. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. He had tried to be clever, but he had underestimated Detective Reyes. And he had forgotten one crucial detail, a crumpled gas station receipt. He stammered, his voice barely audible. I can explain. But Detective Reyes cut him off. I don't think you can, Mr. Peterson. We have you on security footage, purchasing gas just a few blocks from Gleaming Gems, 30 minutes before the robbery. We have the gun used in the robbery in your car. And we have your credit card information on the receipt. Your alibi is a lie. You were never in Canada. Mark Peterson's lawyer looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. He knew that the case was lost. Detective Reyes leaned forward, his eyes boring into Mark Peterson's. So, Mr. Peterson, are you ready to tell us the truth? Mark Peterson finally broke down. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob. Okay, he said, his voice muffled by his hands. Okay, I did it. I robbed Gleaming Gems. Mark Peterson, now sobbing uncontrollably, confessed everything. He admitted that he had been struggling with gambling debts and had seen the Serafina necklace in the window of Gleaming Gems. He knew it was valuable and he saw it as a way out of his financial problems. He had planned the robbery carefully, studying the store's security measures and Mrs. Higgins's routine. He knew that she opened the store alone every morning. He had even practiced his escape route. He explained that he had lied about being in Canada because he knew that if he could establish an alibi, he would be in the clear. He had even gone so far as to book a flight to Toronto and reserve a room at the Grand Majestic Hotel, intending to cancel them at the last minute. He thought he had covered his tracks perfectly. But he hadn't counted on the gas station receipt. I just needed to fill up the tank, he sobbed. I didn't think it would matter. I always throw those receipts away. Detective Reyes listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He had heard countless confessions in his career, but this one was particularly pathetic. Mark Peterson wasn't a hardened criminal, he was just a desperate man who had made a terrible mistake. "Where is the jewelry, Mr. Peterson?" Detective Reyes asked, his voice calm but firm. "We need to recover it." Mark Peterson hesitated for a moment. He knew that he had to cooperate if he wanted any chance of leniency. It's at my friend's house," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I gave it to him to hold on to. He doesn't know where it came from." "What's your friend's name?" Detective Reyes asked. "His name is David Miller," Mark Peterson replied. Detective Reyes instructed Officer Davies to bring David Miller in for questioning. While they waited, he continued to question Mark Peterson about the details of the robbery. He wanted to make sure that he had a complete picture of what had happened. A few hours later, David Miller arrived at the police station. He was a nervous young man with wide eyes and a hesitant demeanor. He claimed that he knew nothing about the robbery and that Mark Peterson had simply asked him to hold onto a bag for a few days. He didn't know what was inside. Detective Reyes didn't believe him. He could sense that David Miller was hiding something. He pressed him harder, showing him pictures of the stolen jewelry and explaining the seriousness of the situation. Finally, David Miller broke down and confessed. He admitted that he knew the jewelry was stolen and that Mark Peterson had told him about the robbery. He had agreed to hide the jewelry in exchange for a share of the profits. Detective Reyes and Officer Davies went to David Miller's apartment and recovered the stolen jewelry. The Serafina necklace and the dragon's breath ring were both intact. Mrs. Higgins was overjoyed when she learned that her stolen treasures had been recovered. She thanked Detective Reyes and Officer Davies profusely, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Mark Peterson and David Miller were both charged with robbery and conspiracy. They faced a long prison sentence. Detective Reyes closed the case, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He had caught the criminals, recovered the stolen jewelry, and brought justice to Mrs. Higgins. And it had all started with a crumpled gas station receipt. A small, insignificant piece of paper that had ultimately unraveled a carefully constructed lie. It was a reminder that even the smallest details can be crucial in solving a crime. The crumpled gas station receipt, now carefully preserved in a clear plastic bag, sat on Detective Reyes's desk. It wasn't much to look at, just a thin slip of thermal paper, faded and slightly greasy. But to Detective Reyes, it was a work of art, a testament to the power of observation and the importance of even the smallest details. Let's take a closer look at that receipt. Speedy Gas. 123, Elm Street. Anytown, USA. Date, October 27, 2024. Time, 9:30 a.m. Pump, 4 gallons, 10. 5, price/gallon, $3. 50, subtotal, $36. 75, tax, $2. 57, total, $39. 32, payment, credit card. Card type, Visa. Card number, XXXXXXXXXXXXX1234. Name, Mark Peterson. Thank you. Come again. The receipt was simple, straightforward. But it told a story. A story that directly contradicted Mark Peterson's carefully constructed alibi. The gas station, Speedy Gas, was located just 3 blocks from Gleaming Gems. Anyone familiar with the area knew that. It was a small, unassuming gas station, often overlooked by drivers rushing to get to their destinations. But on this particular morning, it had played a pivotal role in a major crime. The time on the receipt, 9:30 a.m., was crucial. The robbery at Gleaming Gems had occurred at approximately 10 a.m. That meant that Mark Peterson had been at the gas station just 30 minutes before the robbery. It would have taken him less than 5 minutes to drive from the gas station to the jewelry store. The fact that the purchase was made with a credit card, and that the name on the card was Mark Peterson, was the final nail in the coffin. It proved, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Mark Peterson was in the area at the time of the robbery. Detective Reyes knew that the security footage from the gas station would only confirm what the receipt already suggested. It would show Mark Peterson, filling his car with gas, paying with his credit card, and then driving away. It would be a visual confirmation of his guilt. He leaned back in his chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had solved the case. He had caught the criminals. And he had done it all with the help of a crumpled gas station receipt. But as he stared at the receipt, he couldn't help but wonder what had possessed Mark Peterson to rob Gleaming Gems. Was it really just about the money? Or was there something more to it? He decided to pay Mrs. Higgins another visit. Perhaps she could shed some light on Mark Peterson's motives. Maybe he had said something, or done something, that had given her a clue. It was worth a shot. Even though the case was closed, Detective Reyes always felt a need to understand the why behind the crime. It helped him to make sense of the world, and to be a better detective. He knew that every case was different, and that every criminal had their own unique motivations. But he also knew that there were certain patterns, certain common threads that ran through all of them. And he was always trying to find those patterns, to understand those threads. Because in the end, that was what being a detective was all about, understanding people. Understanding their motivations, their desires, and their fears. And using that understanding to bring them to justice. Before visiting Mrs. Higgins, Detective Reyes decided to review the security footage from the Speedy gas station. As he suspected, it clearly showed Mark Peterson pulling up to Pump 4 in his beat-up sedan. The time stamp on the footage matched the time on the receipt, 9:30 a.m. Mark Peterson, wearing the same baseball cap he had been wearing when apprehended, got out of the car and began filling the gas tank. He glanced around nervously, as if he were afraid of being seen. He then went inside the gas station convenience store, paid with his credit card, and returned to his car. The footage was irrefutable. With the security footage in hand, Detective Reyes returned to the interrogation room. Mark Peterson, looking pale and defeated, sat slumped in his chair. His lawyer sat beside him, whispering words of encouragement. Detective Reyes placed the plastic bag containing the gas station receipt on the table. He then activated the laptop and displayed the security footage on the monitor. "Mr. Peterson," Detective Reyes said, his voice calm but firm, "care to explain this?" Mark Peterson stared at the receipt and the security footage, his eyes wide with panic. He knew that he was cornered. There was no way out. He stammered, I can explain. That wasn't me. I mean, it was my car, but I wasn't driving it." Detective Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Who was driving your car, Mr. Peterson?" Mark Peterson hesitated for a moment, searching for a plausible explanation. I lent it to a friend," he said finally. "He needed to borrow it to run some errands." "What's your friend's name, Mr. Peterson?" Detective Reyes asked, his voice skeptical. "His name is John Smith," Mark Peterson replied, avoiding Detective Reyes's gaze. Detective Reyes chuckled. "John Smith? That's a very common name, Mr. Peterson. Can you give me a last name, and an address?" Mark Peterson squirmed in his chair. I don't know his last name. And I don't know his address. He's just a friend from the gym." Detective Reyes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Peterson, are you telling me that you lent your car to a man named John Smith, whom you barely know, and you have no idea where he lives? And that this John Smith just happened to be filling your car with gas 3 blocks from Gleaming Gems, 30 minutes before the robbery?" Mark Peterson's face was now slick with sweat. He knew that his story was ridiculous, but he didn't know what else to say. "Look," he said, his voice pleading, "I'm telling you the truth. I lent my car to a friend. I swear." Detective Reyes sighed. Mr. Peterson, we have security footage of you filling your car with gas. We have your credit card information on the receipt. And we know that you lied about being in Canada. Your alibi is a complete fabrication. Why don't you just tell us the truth?" Mark Peterson remained silent, his eyes fixed on the table. He knew that he was defeated. He had tried to lie his way out of the situation, but he had failed. The evidence was overwhelming. Detective Reyes decided to change his approach. He softened his voice and leaned closer to Mark Peterson. "Mr. Peterson," he said, "I know that you're in trouble. But I also know that you're not a bad person. You made a mistake. A big mistake. But it's not too late to make things right. Tell us the truth. Tell us why you robbed Gleaming Gems. Tell us where the jewelry is. And we can work something out." Mark Peterson looked up at Detective Reyes, his eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this mess. Maybe he could still salvage something. He took a deep breath and said, "Okay. Okay, I'll tell you everything." Even though Mark Peterson had already confessed to the robbery, Detective Reyes knew that there were still loose ends to tie up. He wanted to make sure that he had a complete understanding of everything that had happened. One of those loose ends was the mysterious John Smith, to whom Mark Peterson claimed he had lent his car. Detective Reyes didn't believe for a second that this John Smith existed, but he knew that he had to investigate the claim. He asked Mark Peterson to describe this John Smith. Mark Peterson gave a vague description: tall, thin, with dark hair, but he couldn't provide any specific details. He couldn't even remember John Smith's last name or address. Detective Reyes ran the description through the police database, but nothing came up. He then asked Mark Peterson for the name of the gym where he supposedly knew John Smith. Mark Peterson hesitated for a moment, then gave the name of a local gym. Detective Reyes sent Officer Davies to the gym to investigate. Officer Davies showed Mark Peterson's description of John Smith to the gym employees, but no one recognized him. They checked their membership records, but there was no John Smith who matched the description. Officer Davies then showed the gym employees a picture of Mark Peterson. Several of them recognized him as a former member. They said that he had stopped coming to the gym a few months ago. Officer Davies asked if Mark Peterson had any friends at the gym. The employees said that he mostly kept to himself. He didn't seem to socialize with anyone. The investigation into John Smith had reached a dead end. Detective Reyes was convinced that he was a figment of Mark Peterson's imagination. But Detective Reyes wasn't ready to give up. He had a feeling that there was someone else involved in the robbery, someone who knew more than they were letting on. He decided to focus his attention on David Miller, the friend to whom Mark Peterson had given the stolen jewelry. He brought David Miller back in for questioning. He reminded him that he had already confessed to helping Mark Peterson hide the jewelry. He then asked him if he knew anything about a John Smith. David Miller's eyes widened in fear. He hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know anyone named John Smith." Detective Reyes could tell that David Miller was lying. He pressed him harder, telling him that he knew that he was hiding something. He reminded him that he could face additional charges if he didn't cooperate. Finally, David Miller broke down. He admitted that he knew about John Smith. He said that Mark Peterson had told him about him. "Who is John Smith?" Detective Reyes asked, his voice urgent. David Miller hesitated for a moment, then said, He's Mark's cousin." Detective Reyes felt a surge of adrenaline. He had a feeling that he was finally getting to the truth. "What's his real name?" he asked. David Miller hesitated again, then said, "I don't know. Mark never told me his real name. He just called him John." "Where does he live?" Detective Reyes asked. David Miller shook his head. "I don't know. Mark never told me that either. He just said that he lived out of town." Detective Reyes didn't believe David Miller completely, but he knew that he was getting closer to the truth. He decided to try a different approach. "Is John involved in the robbery?" he asked. David Miller hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible. "Mark said that John helped him plan it." Detective Reyes felt a surge of triumph. He had finally uncovered the truth. There was another person involved in the robbery. And his name was John, or at least that's what Mark Peterson called him. Now all he had to do was find him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The detective would keep digging deeper until he found the last piece of the puzzle. The real John Smith. Detective Reyes knew that finding Mark Peterson's cousin, John Smith, was crucial to completing the case. He decided to focus on the evidence they already had, the gas station security footage. He reviewed the footage again and again, looking for any clue that might lead him to John Smith. He noticed that after Mark Peterson paid for his gas, he briefly spoke to the cashier. Detective Reyes decided to track down the cashier and see if he remembered anything about Mark Peterson or his cousin. The cashier, a young man named Kevin, remembered Mark Peterson. "Yeah, I remember him," Kevin said. "He came in here the other day. He seemed kind of nervous." Detective Reyes showed Kevin a picture of Mark Peterson. "Is this the man you're talking about?" he asked. Kevin nodded. "That's him. Did he say anything to you?" Detective Reyes asked. "Did he mention anyone else?" Kevin thought for a moment. "He was talking on his phone," he said. "I think I heard him say something about meeting up with someone." "Did you hear the person's name?" Detective Reyes asked, his voice eager. Kevin shook his head. "No, I didn't. He was talking kind of low." Detective Reyes was disappointed, but he didn't give up. He asked Kevin if he had seen anyone else suspicious in the area that day. Kevin thought for a moment, then said, "There was this guy who was hanging around outside for a while. He was kind of shady looking." "Can you describe him?" Detective Reyes asked. Kevin gave a description that matched David Miller's description of John Smith, tall, thin, with dark hair. "Did you see him talking to Mark Peterson?" Detective Reyes asked. Kevin shook his head. "No, I didn't. But he was definitely watching him." Detective Reyes felt a surge of excitement. He was getting closer to finding John Smith. He asked Kevin if there were any other businesses in the area that might have security cameras. Kevin pointed to a convenience store across the street. "They have cameras," he said. "You might want to check with them." Detective Reyes went to the convenience store and spoke to the owner. The owner agreed to let him review the security footage. After hours of painstaking review, Detective Reyes found what he was looking for. The footage showed Mark Peterson talking on his phone inside the gas station. Outside, standing across the street, was a man matching the description of John Smith. The man was watching Mark Peterson intently. The footage wasn't clear enough to identify the man, but it confirmed that he was in the area at the time. It also confirmed that he was likely working with Mark Peterson. Detective Reyes now had even more evidence linking John Smith to the robbery. He just needed to find him. He decided to go back to Mrs. Higgins and see if she remembered anything about a tall, thin man with dark hair who might have been lurking around her store. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. He had a feeling that Mrs. Higgins held the key to unlocking the final piece of the puzzle. And Detective Reyes was determined to find it, no matter how long it took. The search for John Smith continued, the detective driven by the need to bring everyone involved in the Gleaming Gems robbery to justice. He knew he was close. Very close. Detective Reyes found Mrs. Higgins back at Gleaming Gems, carefully rearranging the remaining jewelry in the display cases. The store was slowly returning to its former glory, but the scars of the robbery were still visible. "Mrs. Higgins," Detective Reyes said gently, "I need to ask you a few more questions. It's about the man who helped Mark Peterson plan the robbery." Mrs. Higgins's face clouded over with fear. "You mean there was someone else involved?" she asked, her voice trembling. Detective Reyes nodded. "We believe so. We think his name is John, and he's Mark Peterson's cousin. He's tall, thin, with dark hair. Have you seen anyone like that lurking around the store?" Mrs. Higgins thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I see so many people every day." Detective Reyes showed Mrs. Higgins the security footage from the convenience store, the one that showed a man matching the description of John Smith, watching Mark Peterson at the gas station. Mrs. Higgins peered at the footage through her thick glasses. I think I've seen him," she said slowly. "He was standing across the street from the store a few days ago. He was just watching." "Did he come into the store?" Detective Reyes asked. Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "No, he didn't. He just stood there, watching. It made me a little nervous." "Did you get a good look at his face?" Detective Reyes asked. Mrs. Higgins hesitated. I think so. But it was a few days ago. I'm not sure I would recognize him again." Detective Reyes sighed. He knew that it was a long shot, but he had hoped that Mrs. Higgins would be able to identify John Smith. He decided to try a different approach. "Mrs. Higgins," he said, "can you think of anything unusual that happened in the days leading up to the robbery? Anything that might be connected to this John Smith?" Mrs. Higgins thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. "There was this one thing," she said. "A few days before the robbery, I received a strange phone call. The man on the other end didn't say anything. He just hung up." "Did you recognize the voice?" Detective Reyes asked. Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "No, it was a man's voice, but I didn't recognize it." Detective Reyes felt a surge of excitement. He had a feeling that this phone call was connected to John Smith. "Did you report the phone call to the police?" he asked. Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "No, I didn't. I just thought it was a prank call." Detective Reyes sighed. He knew that if Mrs. Higgins had reported the phone call, they might have been able to trace it back to John Smith. But it was too late now. All he could do was keep digging, keep searching, until he found the elusive John Smith. He thanked Mrs. Higgins for her help and left the store. As he walked back to his car, he couldn't help but feel frustrated. He was so close to solving the case, but he was still missing one crucial piece of the puzzle. He knew that he couldn't give up. He had to find John Smith. He owed it to Mrs. Higgins, and he owed it to himself. He would keep searching, keep investigating, until he brought everyone involved in the Gleaming Gems robbery to justice. The detective knew that the next step was to go back and really dig into the phone records. Perhaps he could find something there, something that would lead him to his man. He hopped in his car and headed back to the station, ready to start the next phase of the investigation. Back at the police station, Detective Reyes dove into the phone records. He obtained Mrs. Higgins's phone records and carefully examined them for any suspicious calls in the days leading up to the robbery. After hours of searching, he found it, a call made to Mrs. Higgins's store 3 days before the robbery. The call lasted only a few seconds, and there was no message left. It was the silent phone call that Mrs. Higgins had described. Detective Reyes traced the phone number back to a prepaid cell phone. These burner phones are hard to trace. He then checked the location of the cell phone when the call was made. The cell phone tower that the call had pinged off of was located several miles away from Mrs. Higgins's store, in a completely different part of town. Detective Reyes felt a surge of disappointment. He had hoped that the phone call would lead him directly to John Smith, but it seemed like another dead end. He decided to try a different approach. He checked the phone records of Mark Peterson and David Miller, hoping to find a connection to the prepaid cell phone. After hours of searching, he found it. A few days before the robbery, Mark Peterson had exchanged several text messages with the prepaid cell phone. Detective Reyes felt a surge of triumph. He had finally found a direct link between Mark Peterson and the mysterious John Smith. He obtained a warrant to track the location of the prepaid cell phone. The phone was currently located in a small town several hours away. Detective Reyes and a team of officers drove to the town and began searching for the phone. They eventually located it in a small, run-down apartment building. They knocked on the door of the apartment and announced themselves as police officers. A young man opened the door. He was tall, thin, with dark hair, just as Mrs. Higgins and David Miller had described. "Are you John Smith?" Detective Reyes asked. The young man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," he said. "But that's not my real name." Detective Reyes placed John Smith under arrest. He then searched the apartment. Inside, he found a treasure trove of evidence, detailed plans of gleaming gems, security camera footage of Mrs. Higgins, and a list of the most valuable jewelry in the store. He also found the duffel bag that Mark Peterson had used to carry the stolen jewelry. Detective Reyes brought John Smith back to the police station and began questioning him. John Smith initially denied any involvement in the robbery, but after being confronted with the overwhelming evidence, he broke down and confessed. He admitted that he had helped Mark Peterson plan the robbery. He had provided him with information about the store's security measures and Mrs. Higgins's routine. He had even driven Mark Peterson to the store on the day of the robbery. John Smith was charged with robbery and conspiracy. He faced a long prison sentence. With John Smith in custody, Detective Reyes had finally solved the case. He had brought all of the criminals involved in the Gleaming Gems robbery to justice. As he reflected on the case, Detective Reyes realized that it had all started with a crumpled gas station receipt. A small, insignificant piece of paper that had ultimately unraveled a carefully constructed lie. It was a reminder that even the smallest details can be crucial in solving a crime. And it was a testament to the power of persistence, dedication, and a keen eye for detail. The pursuit of justice was finally over. Justice for Mrs. Higgins and the Gleaming Gems store. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced the sentences. Mark Peterson received a 10-year prison sentence for robbery and conspiracy. David Miller received a 5-year sentence for aiding and abetting. John Smith, whose real name was revealed to be Kevin Johnson, received a 12-year sentence for robbery and conspiracy. As the three men were led away, Detective Reyes felt a sense of closure. He had brought them to justice. He had protected the community. And he had done it all with hard work, dedication, and a keen eye for detail. A few weeks later, Detective Reyes visited Mrs. Higgins at Gleaming Gems. The store was fully restored, and the jewelry sparkled even brighter than before. "Mrs. Higgins," Detective Reyes said, "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." Mrs. Higgins smiled warmly. "I'm doing much better, Detective," she said. "Thanks to you, I feel safe again. And I'm so grateful to have my jewelry back." Detective Reyes smiled. "I'm glad I could help," he said. "I don't know how to thank you enough," Mrs. Higgins said. "Just knowing that you're safe and your store is back to normal is enough for me," Detective Reyes said. As he was leaving, Mrs. Higgins stopped him. "Detective," she said, "I was wondering, what was it that made you so sure that Mark Peterson was the robber?" Detective Reyes smiled. "It all started with a crumpled gas station receipt," he said. "A small, insignificant piece of paper that most people would have thrown away without a second thought." He explained to Mrs. Higgins how the receipt had placed Mark Peterson near the scene of the crime just 30 minutes before the robbery. He also explained how the security footage from the gas station had confirmed that Mark Peterson was the one who had made the purchase. Mrs. Higgins's eyes widened in amazement. "I can't believe it," she said. "A crumpled gas station receipt. It's incredible." Detective Reyes nodded. "It's a reminder that even the smallest details can be crucial in solving a crime," he said. "That's why it's so important to be thorough and to never overlook anything, no matter how insignificant it may seem." He looked around the gleaming gems one last time, the afternoon sun glinting off of the pristine glass display cases and twinkling in the facets of the precious stones within. It was a place of beauty, of dreams, and now, a place of resilience. Detective Reyes was glad he could help bring that back to Mrs. Higgins. Detective Reyes left the store, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had solved the case. He had brought the criminals to justice. And he had reminded himself of the importance of thorough investigation and attention to detail. As he walked away, he couldn't help but smile. He knew that he would never look at a gas station receipt the same way again. It would always be a reminder of the gleaming gems robbery, and the power of a crumpled piece of paper to unravel a carefully constructed lie. It was a job well done. A case closed. And another victory for justice. The end.